Okay, so we are recording now. Let's have a look at 4.1, our two-step equations. This is what we started in on yesterday. So first, let's just kind of go over again and review what a linear equation is. So it's kind of like a written math sentence that has an equal sign in the middle, right? We're only going to have one equal sign per line. So it's kind of like you can think about it as a written math sentence. It's going to contain only one kind of letter, so an X or a Y or an A or a B or something like that that's representing an unknown. And the letter is kind of like a placeholder for a value we haven't figured out yet, for an unknown value. Unlike when we were graphing lines with two unknowns in an equation, those could vary. In this case, when we're solving equations and there's only one unknown, there's only one thing it can be, but we're going to have to use our math skills to figure out what it is. So let's remind ourselves, how do we solve an equation? This is what we started in on yesterday. First of all, check that you only have one kind of letter, like an X and nothing else, or Y's and nothing else, or A's and nothing else, or B's and nothing else. If you have more than one kind of letter, you can't solve for it unless you have multiple equations. The second thing we're going to do is put all the terms with letters on one side of the equal sign. Like the X's, we'll put them all on one side. And the regular numbers, we'll put them all on the other side. So with that equal sign is going to make our divider. We're going to put all the unknowns, like all the X's on one side, or all the Y's on one side, or all the A's on one side, or all the B's on one side, and all the regular numbers on the other side. And we're going to put terms, like I said, I already said that, put terms without letters, the regular numbers on the other side of the equal sign. Okay, so let's actually try a few of these out, right? We remember that we are undoing operations when we're solving equations. Thanks for letting me know. If someone's clicking on me there, it can mute me. How long was I muted for there? Here we go. All right, so let's jump in on a couple of examples. So we're going to solve the following, and I would say when we're doing this, I would say show your work, right? So that would be something that I would want you to see. So I want you to model this when you're solving equations. I want you to do it the same way I do, okay? I want you to actually solve these equations and show your full work. So here we go. In this question, I've got 4x equals negative 32. So I can say to myself, okay, I want x by itself. I'm trying to isolate x. So I need to undo any operations that are being done on x. Of course, I'm going to do it in reverse order. You'll remember that from yesterday, reverse BEDMAS order, right? So we're used to seeing BEDMAS go like this. We're going to be going in reverse order, meaning we're starting by undoing subtracting and adding, then we're undoing multiplying and dividing, and then we're undoing exponents and brackets. So in this case, we're going to start by undoing adding and subtracting. Well, there isn't any. The x doesn't have anything adding or subtracting it, so it's good to go. We don't have to do any adding or subtracting stuff. What about multiplying or dividing? Well, yeah, we do have some multiplying or dividing of the x. 4 is multiplying the x. So I'm going to need to undo that 4. I'm going to need to undo it. So how do I undo multiplying? Well, that's easy. I just divide. And this is something that you're used to because we did this a lot in the trigonometry unit. So this one will feel pretty familiar. We're going to divide both sides by 4. We can do that because both sides are equal. So as long as we do the same thing to both sides, it doesn't change the fact that they're equal. Okay, so 4 divided by 4 is just 1. That's going to cancel out, and we're left with just x. So we did it. We got rid of the 4 on that side. Now on the other side, we can say, okay, 32 divided by 4 is 8, but it's actually negative 32 divided by 4. And a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So our answer is negative 8. Now when you answer these, I really like to see a box around it. So if you're working on paper, this is a really good way to do it, is throw a box around it. That shows me that's your final answer and gives me a really clear idea about your work, right? So I've shown all my steps here. I've shown my division by 4. I've shown my getting x by itself, and I've put a nice box around my final answer. Okay, here's another one. I'd like you to try this right now. So I'm going to pause our recording. Go ahead right now. I'm going to give you about 52 seconds to give this one a try. Go for it. Solve for y. Okay, here we go. Let's do it together now that you've had a chance to try it out. Now with each of these, I'm going to do one first, and then I'm going to remove the screen and I'm going to have you try one. So this is really good practice, right? This is practice that I expect you to be doing. Have paper or your whiteboard if you took that home. Have that in front of you. Try each of these as we go. Okay, so we've got 18 equals negative 2y. We want to get y by itself. Right now it's being multiplied by negative 2. So let's divide both sides by negative 2. We can do it to both sides because they're equal. As long as you do the same thing to both sides, we're okay. So negative 2 divided by negative 2 cancels out and just equals 1. So that's going to be 1y. We just write that as y. 18 divided by 2 is 9, but it's actually divided by negative 2. Negative positive divided by negative is negative. Aha, that was me this time. Thanks. Okay, so I hope you saw what I was doing there. I was just following through the steps. I said, okay, I got to undo multiplication. Y is being multiplied by negative 2, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. 18 divided by negative 2 is negative 9. Let's throw a box around that to show that's my final answer. All right, let's move on to our next one. Here we go. This time we've got addition. This time we've got addition. So we want x by itself, but it's not by itself. Currently it has a 5 added to it. We got to undo that operation so that we get x by itself. How do we undo addition? Well, we subtract. Now often I will write it like this. I'm going to rewrite this just below. I will write it just like this. I'll just write it directly above. That's a nice easy way of doing it, so that we don't have to rewrite a whole line. So x plus 5, but I'm subtracting 5 from it. So when you add 5 and you subtract 5, those cancel out to be 0. We're left with just x. So we did it. We got x by itself. But we need to subtract 5 from the other side as well. 12 minus 5, that's 7. So I subtracted 5 from both sides. I can do that since both sides are equal. Now I'll put a box around it, x equals 7. Okay, here's your turn. I'd like you to give this one a try. We are subtracting 9. How do we undo subtraction? What do we need to do to both sides to undo subtraction? Go for it. Okay, let's give this a try. Here we go. I know I need to add 9 to both sides because I need to undo the operation here. So here I go. I'm going to add 9 to both sides. Actually, let's rewrite it first. I kind of like that better because it gives me a little more space to work with and it shows me my original equation. So I'm going to change my colors here. I'm going to go to green. I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So my y is now going to be by itself because I had 9 subtracting it, but I added 9 to get rid of it, so now it's by itself. And 4 plus 9 is going to be 13. Let's put a box around it to show it's our final answer. Okay, so far so good. I hope this is reminding you well of the stuff we learned yesterday. Here's our next one. I see that my unknown is being multiplied by negative 3. So how do I undo multiplication? I divide. I'm going to have to divide both sides by negative 3. That's how I'm going to undo that multiplication by -3. I'll divide by -3. So those -3's are going to cancel out. -3 divided by -3 is just 1. That leaves us with W by itself on that side. And negative divided by a negative is going to be positive. 33 divided by 3 is 11. So W is going to be 11. Now you may be at a point right now where you're saying, hey, Mr. Ray, I can just look at that and I can figure out just by looking at the equation that W is 11. And that may be true, and that's great if that's the case. But right now what we're doing is we're practicing our methods with our simplest versions of equations. So we need to use these methods because when we get to later equations, it's going to be basically impossible to just look at it and figure it out by just checking it out. We do need these methods that we're following. Okay, I'd like you to go for it and try this one. What do I need to do? What do we need to undo in order to get W by itself? Give it a shot. All right, here we go. Let's try this one. It's adding. I've got adding being done to W. How do I undo adding? Well, I subtract. So 4 plus W equals -2. I need to subtract 4 from both sides to get rid of that 4. So that's going to leave W by itself. -2 minus another 4 gives us -6. Okay, a couple more examples, then we're going to jump in on some practice. We got a dividing one here. But this doesn't really change anything. We just do the same we've been doing before. We've got a division problem. So how are we going to undo division? We're going to multiply. Because x is being divided by 2, I'm going to multiply to undo that. So I've got x over 2 equals 6. I need to multiply both sides by 2. Now what's that going to look like? Well, if I do it on this side, I can actually just put the 2 on top. And on this side, I can't put the 2 right next to the 6 without some brackets, or it'll look like 62, which it's not. It's 6 times 2. Right? So I've multiplied both sides by 2. There we go. Now on this side, I can cross the 2's out because 2 divided by 2 is just 1. That's what I wanted. That's why I multiplied by 2, is to get rid of that 2 on the bottom. And 6 times 2 is 12. Let's put a box around that because that's my final answer. Okay, your turn. Let's give this one a try. Oof, this one's a little tricky. I want you to take a moment and just give this one a shot. You're dealing with 2 different operations here. So we did do two-step equation solving yesterday. That W is being multiplied by 2 and divided by 3. So I'm going to need to undo both of those operations. I could do them one at a time. Or if you're comfortable, because multiplying and dividing, technically we can do those at the same time in our order of operations rules. Give this a shot. See how it goes. If you do get an answer, you can go ahead and post it in the chat. If you're not sure, that's okay. But if you do get an answer, you can feel free to go ahead and post it in the chat. Go for it. Give it a try. Okay, I'm going to give this a try. If you are part of the way done, that's okay. Just follow along as we go. So I've got -4 and I've got 2W over 3. And if you want to post an answer in the chat, as I see some people have done, thanks. That's great. Not a requirement, but you can if you want. Now I notice I need to undo a multiplication by 2. I need to undo that. And I need to also undo division by 3. So I need to undo both of those things to have W by itself. I need to undo those 2 things. Undo multiplication by 2, undo division by 3. I can do that. I could do them, I could do them all at once, but I think I'm going to do them one at a time, just to make it a little more clear. So first let's undo our multiplication by 3. I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. So I'm going to put a 3 up here on this side, and I'm going to put a 3 on this side. I should also put some brackets around the -4 because it's multiplying this 3. Just so I want to make sure I know what's going on there. So I'm going to be a little extra careful. Now the 3's are going to cancel out. That's why we multiplied by 3. 3 divided by 3 is just 1. So what are we left with? We still got 2w on this side. And on the other side, we got -4 times 3. 4 times 3 is 12, but a negative times a positive is a negative, so -12. Okay, what's my next step? I got to undo this multiplication by 2. Let's do it. Now, just to be clear, I could have done either of them first. I could have undone the multiplication by 2 and then undone the division by 3. I chose to undo the division by 3 and then undo the multiplication by 2. The order doesn't matter when it's both multiplying and dividing. They can happen at the same time or in either order. It doesn't matter. When you're undoing operations, though, you do have to follow reverse BEDMAS, right? So adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing are the same operation, but we got to undo our adding and subtracting first before our multiplying and dividing. Okay, so let's see what we get. 2 divided by 2 goes away, which is what we wanted to do. That's why we did it. -12 divided by 2. Well, it's going to be a negative number, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. So if you said -6, yeah, you got it. So that's a two-step equation. 2 parts to that one. All right, here's another two-step equation. In this equation, I had a look at my x, and I noticed that it has 2 things going on. It's being multiplied by 2, so I'm going to need to undo that. And it's also being added, 4 is being added to it. So I need to undo that. I'd like you to let me know in the chat. Now don't hit enter. I just want you to type it into the chat box, but don't hit enter. Okay, so type into the chat box, please, right now. Which of those operations do I want to undo first? So let's have a look at this. And which one do we undo first? Well, we got to think about reverse BEDMAS, right? So BEDMAS, brackets, exponents, divide and multiply, add and subtract. But we're doing it in reverse because we're undoing operations to get x by itself. So if I'm starting from the end and going left, adding and subtracting need to be undone first. Then once that's done, I can undo dividing and multiplying. But adding and subtracting need to be undone first. Then I can undo dividing and multiplying. So let's undo the adding and subtracting. Now this is really important. You're going to see a lot of questions like this. We need to always remember this. Undo the adding and subtracting first. So always start there by undoing the adding and subtracting first. I'm going to undo the adding. There's no subtracting, there's only adding. So I'm going to undo the adding first. I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. I can do that because both sides are equal. And they would still be equal if I do the same thing to both sides. Okay, so I've subtracted 4 from both sides. So all I'll be left with on the left side is 2x. On the right side, 10 minus 4, that's 6. Now we're on to the second part. We can now undo dividing and multiplying. In this case, we want to undo multiplying because it's being multiplied by 2. So I'll undo the multiplying by dividing, doing the opposite operation. 2 divided by 2 is just 1, so I can cross those out. They just equal 1. So x is now by itself. 6 divided by 2, that's 3. All right, here's one for you to try. Actually, this one's pretty weird. So I think I want to give this one. I think I want to do this one myself rather than having you do this one. So let me explain how this one works. I put this one in here because it's a little different. You might remember when we were doing our order of operations unit at the beginning of the year. This is part of the reason we spent a lot of time on it. When we have a setup like this where we've got some stuff on top of a dividing line and then some stuff on the bottom, we're really pretending that there's brackets here. So whenever we see that, we're pretending that there's brackets around that stuff. Okay, if there's like more than one thing. So for example, if I had dividing line, it was like 2 plus 7 times 3 and 5 times 2 minus 4. I have to pretend that there's brackets around the whole thing. So I have to deal with those brackets first. Okay, so we did that when we were dealing with order of operations, bed mass at the beginning of the year. So when I'm looking at my reverse bed mass, when I'm trying to undo all of these operations, I say, okay, bed mass, but I got to be going backwards. I want to undo the operations. So I want to undo adding and subtracting first. But here's the catch. This stuff is inside a bracket, so I have to get to that last because brackets are right here in bed mass. So when we're undoing operations, we're actually going to undo the brackets last. They're the last thing we're going to do. Now in the videos from yesterday, he called them parentheses, things in the parentheses. We call them brackets. It means the same thing. But in the video yesterday, he had the little chart and he showed on the chart the order of operations and he called them parentheses instead of brackets, if I'm remembering correctly. Okay, so we need to undo those brackets last because when we have a setup like this, we got to undo the other stuff and it's basically as if there's brackets there. Okay, so that's a little tricky. That's why I wanted to show you this one. So here we go. We're actually going to have to undo. We can't undo adding and subtracting because it's locked up in those brackets. So we're going to need to move right to dividing and multiplying, our next one. Let's undo this division by 6. How do we do that? Well, we got to multiply both sides by 6. So I'm going to multiply this side by 6, and I'm also going to multiply this side by 6. I multiply both sides by 6. Sorry, I should have done that in green, so you can tell that it's a new one. There we go. So this one is a bit tricky, right? No doubt about it. This one is a bit tricky. There we go. Okay, so now we say, all right, let's cross those 6's out because 6 divided by 6 is just 1. What are we left with? On this side, we've got W plus 4. We can drop those brackets because there's nothing else left there. And 3 times 6 is 18. Okay, so we've undone everything. There's no exponents. We're on to the last one, our brackets. Right? We're under our last one, our brackets. So now we can drop those brackets and undo the operations in the brackets. We couldn't have done it before now, or we would have done things out of order. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. That leaves us with just a W on this side, and 18 minus 4 is 14. Now, let's actually check our answers here to make sure they're correct. You'll see at the top it says solve, and then check your answer. So let's do that. I actually want to see if my answers are correct. So here's how you can check your answer. For this one, I'm going to do a check right here. And so I'm going to actually take my x equals 3 and I'm going to put it into my equation. So I'm going to go 2 times 3, basically saying where that x was. I believe it was 3. So let's check it out and see if it is. So 2 times 3 is 6. And 6 plus 4 is 10. So I end up with 10 equals 10. Okay, so that is true. So it checks out. 10 does equal 10, obviously. So I got that one correct. Let's do a check on B here. Let's do a check on this one. I don't have a ton of room, so I'm going to have to do my check down here. So let's put a 14 in where W is. So we're going to go 14 plus 4 over 6 equals 3. Is that true? Let's check it and find out. 14 plus 4 is 18. 18 divided by 6. Oh, that's 3. So 3 equals 3. Yep, that's true. So it checks out. So that was correct. We did that correctly. We got the right answer. So that is how you can actually check your work. Let's do one final one, and then it's going to be time for a little bit of practice. Oof. Look at this one. This is a toughie. I'd like you to take a moment. Just think to yourself. You don't have to post this or anything. Just think to yourself. What operations am I going to undo first? What operations am I going to undo first? Remember that we're dealing with order of operations, brackets, exponents, divide and multiply, add and subtract. We're going backwards. We're going to undo adding and subtracting first. Then we're going to undo multiplying and dividing. Then we're going to undo exponents, which you don't have any, and I'm not going to give you any. And then we're going to undo brackets. All right, so let's undo addition and subtraction first. Well, I've got this -6 multiplying the subtracting the x. I want to undo my subtraction by adding 6 to both sides to get rid of that. And I know that I need to do addition and subtraction first. I need to undo it first. So what am I left with? Oops, let's go back to blue. So I got a -x over 4 on this side. That's all that's left over. And on the other side, 2 plus 6 is 8. Well, what's my next thing? I got to undo dividing and multiplying. So let's undo. Now you might say there's only dividing. It's not actually true. This one's a little tricky. We are dividing by 4. But you'll also notice there's a negative in front. That means we're actually multiplying this by -1. We're also multiplying it by -1. Now that's a little tricky. So what am I going to do? Well, let's undo the division first by multiplying both sides by 4. So I'm going to put some brackets around here so I don't mess that up. I'm going to multiply that by 4. And I got to multiply this side by 4. I got to do it to both sides, of course. So 4 divided by 4, that's going to cancel out. We're just left with -x. And 8 times 4 is 32. We're almost done now. If -x equals 32, positive x must equal -32. So really what I'm saying is I've got this -x, really that is -1x. So I'm gonna draw the 1 in there. We don't usually write it. But that's really what that means. Right? We don't normally write the 1. Really what that means is -1x. So what do I need to do? I need to get rid of that -1. I need to divide both sides by -1. That'll get rid of it. So we're just left with x. And 32 divided by -1, well, 32 divided by 1 is just 32, but a positive divided by a negative gives us a negative answer, so -32. Tough one. Let's check our answer. Let's check our answer. Okay, so we've got -x. Where x was, I'm going to put in -32. So I'm going to write out the exact same thing, but I'm just going to put a -32 in where x is. This is a little complicated. So you'll notice I've got the double negative there. Those are going to cancel out. It's like subtracting a negative would cancel out. So it's actually going to be positive 32. (32) divided by 4 is 8. 8 minus 6 is 2. So 2 equals 2. It sure does. So that means I did it correctly. It checks out. I got it. Okay, so that's 1 and 2 step equations. We've been going for a while now, so we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to jump in on some practice. We'll take some time to do some practice. So it's 10:42 right now. We're going to take a break until 10:55. 10:55. That's going to give us 12 minutes to stretch and move around, grab a drink of water or a snack, and I'll see you back here at 10:55, where we'll jump in on some practice.